Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about Pope John the 23rd. He was born in 1881 from peasant, relatively poor family. And just prior to being made Pope, he was made the Cardinal of Venice, so in a pretty impressive position. When he came out, he was elected Pope on October 28th, 1958. When he came out, it was a little bit of a surprise because the former one had been a very serious, gaunt fellow. And here comes this rotund, very large, very friendly Pope that comes out waving and being so amazing. Well, he was elected when he was 77, and he was expected to be a transitional Pope. So in other words, there were some that were for one fellow or another, and they said, well, let's get this guy in just to kind of have some time go by. So that's kind of how the thought was when he came in. But about 3 months after he was elected Pope, he called together the Vatican Council, Vatican Council II, and there hadn't been anything like this since Vatican Council I back in, I'm trying to remember what year that was. Hold on a second. It was like 1870 was the last one. So here we are, 1958. There hadn't been anything like this in almost 100 years. And before that was the Council of Trent, which was back in the 1500s. So this was a pretty monumental thing for a pope who was expected to be transitional. But I had the opportunity. I went to spiritual direction to a very smart fellow priest, and he advised me to read the book, The Journey of the Soul. This is a book by Pope John the 23rd. And it's not like he wrote a book. It's not. He did a retreat every year when he was ordained. They called them Ignatian retreats. So they basically went in silence and had deep thoughts and what have you, and prayed a lot. And then at the end of that, he wrote up a summary of where he felt like he was headwise. What's fascinating is you start out in this book with a very young, enthusiastic fellow, and then over time matures to where he becomes a very wise fellow, and obviously a very dynamic one. So he's known for a couple things. I just include a couple anecdotes. There was one time when President Kennedy was going to go visit him, and they were really worried about the decorum and the formal way in which the Pope should greet, the President and the First Lady. And they come in front of him, and he sees her, and he goes, "Jackie!" and runs up to her and gives her a big hug. And there's another time where he's giving a tour to some people of the Vatican. And they're really taken aback with how large it is and everything. And one of them asked and said, "Well, Pope John, how many people work here?" And he very candidly said, "Oh, about half of them." But he opened the Vatican Council too. And there's nothing that's changed our church more in the last 500 years than the Vatican Council. He's very concerned with not the fact, and here's a quote for him. He says, "The substance of the ancient deposit of faith, all the things we know as a part of the church, is one thing, and the way in which it is presented it is another." So when he did his introduction to the Vatican Council, he basically said, as a church, we need to open the windows and let some fresh air in. And it wasn't a matter of ultimate change he wanted. It was much more a matter of encountering the world. So when this council came together and, the conservative bureaucrats put things together, the bishops that came together, and I talked to one of the bishops, our bishop here in Green Bay, Bishop Wysislo, was at this. And he said it was a moment when the Holy Spirit was present. He said we were a bunch of bumbling country bishops, and we came together, and it was just amazing. What's interesting about Pope John the 23rd is he, when he was about 60 or 61, and I got this from the book, he had a real moment where he realized one of his siblings had died, and another was sick, and he was quite rotund, as I had mentioned, so he knew his health wasn't all that good. So he thought, well, I really have to be prepared to die. And it was interesting reading these reflections, because it took him about 2 more, which means it was almost about a 2 or 3 year period in which he really accepted his own death. And in accepting his death, it seemed like it's almost like his life started to take off from that point. It was after that he was made cardinal. It was after that he was sent over to France to have a very major position as well. And we're sitting there and realizing after he accepted his death, it said his life really took off. And then, of course, he becomes Pope. He gets sick at the very early part of this, but it didn't stop the momentum of what had started at Vatican II. So Vatican II went from about 62 to about 65, and then they did some additional work after, but that's the main gist of it. And during that time, they made out 16 documents, and these basically revolutionized the way the church interacts with the world. It didn't change any of the teachings. It changed how we interact with everyone else. He wrote a thing, and I want to read it because it just gives a good insight into the depth of this fellow. So he's on his deathbed. He knows the whole world is watching exactly what's going on. And this is what he says. He says, now more than ever, he's on his deathbed, certainly more than in past centuries, our intention is to serve people as such, not only Catholics, to defend above all and everywhere the rights of the human person, and not only those of the Catholic Church. It is not the gospel that changes. It is we who begin to understand it better. The moment has arrived when we must recognize the signs of the times, seize the opportunity, and look far abroad. Now, if he can say this on his deathbed, imagine how we can look forward to good days ahead from the works that we do and the things that I say that might encourage others to have a better sense of peace throughout the world. Well, throughout my world, throughout the little world, but to make a difference. And I think having that upside view can add a lot. May you have a blessed day.